So if you don't have healthy culture, your work environment will pay the price. You're going to lose key people who are going to say, I'm going to pick up my bags and I'm going to go elsewhere.
Or not attract the right people that fit within the organization because of the blinders that you have.
What is a healthy company culture? What are engaged, productive employees? I was happy to have John Ball and his partner Lisa Goyette join me and Brad here on the latest edition of the Cashflow Chronicles. We talked through not only the cash considerations of a healthy culture, but ultimately how you build a healthy organization that's built for long-term sustainability. Hope you guys enjoy. They brought some pretty important insights to understand emotions in the workplace. Well, hey, John and Lisa, I've gotten to meet both of you guys from a various networking standpoint here in the Metro Detroit area. Just learn what you guys do from afar and in detail. I'm really impressed by what you guys have accomplished in the time that you've been in business. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you guys started your business and the route to what you guys do?
We were brainstorming a lot of different businesses, and we both said that if we're going to start something and do a heavy lift of launching something, it's got to be something that we really feel passionate about. And we are both hardwired to care about human beings. We know that we spend a ton of time at work, and we wanted to create something that would allow people to feel like when they come into work, that they're able to be seen for who they are authentically, to be able to communicate in a really healthy manner, and to be able to resolve conflict in a healthy fashion.
I just was seeing John smile a little bit, which just speaks to your two relationship, which is great. I think what I hear all the time in conversations, I think everyone's afraid to speak their mind. And to your guys is what you guys do when you're harboring a lack of communication within a culture. I think that's one issue that I think is becoming more and more of a problem. I'm sure you've seen that in your work. Is that a safe assumption?
It is, and it's the foundations of communication and conflict that are significantly lacking, and we're thoroughly convinced that it's a cultural issue that has been instilled by a number of different factors. Primarily, it's a shift in how human beings are interacting, the work environment, whereas, you share this illustration a lot, I was born and raised north of Frankenmuth, Michigan. Right on the corner of M81 and I-75 was a GM production facility, and most of the quote unquote guys that were part of that organization were there because of the financial benefit, the pride for the company, as well as the benefits. But it was very clear that it was a very autocratic work environment. And now, as we're moving through this shift where the culture in totality in this nation has shifted, and in the global economy, is there's different expectations and there's different ways of communicating. And we're finding from the work that we're doing, going back to what Lisa said around meaningful, engaging work, is that number one, we're still carrying over with us archaic modalities of communication and resolving conflict. And we do a lot of work around deconstructing that mentality of conflict, that it shouldn't even be called conflict, it's relationship. This is what relationship is, and it's challenging. And at times we're going to have tough conversations, but how do we do that in a way where we both really win? I'll be completely honest with you. I don't spare any words. The person that taught me how to manage conflict was my business partner. I wasn't raised in an home environment where I learned that very well. It was you avoid, and a lot of us were in that same position. You just put it under the rug. And so that translates into the business culture as well, with communication and then especially conflict, because so many people have in their minds that conflict is about Third World War and pulling out the bombs. Mm-hmm. It is. People will avoid it at all cost.
One of the questions I was going to wanted to ask you guys was, as you step into organizations, at that point, they've recognized they have a problem, right? What are some of the ways that you recommend of where are there opportunities for them to improve, to try to develop a better culture or recognize their weak points?
One of the biggest things that companies need to be able to do is be aware. So it's being really honest about, this is where we're struggling, and be willing to admit that, okay, we're doing really good here, but here's some areas that we've got challenges, and identify what those are, not sugarcoat them. When companies are able to really dial into, yep, we've got some people problems, and almost always that's why we're brought in, right? We're having problems with communicating. We can't resolve this conflict. It's growing. It's impacting how we perform. It's impacting alignment. It's impacting collaboration and strategic visioning. If companies are willing to be very self-aware and very honest,
You got to be open.
then we are able to start, it's like I kind of vision like an onion. Let's start peeling the layers of the onion away, and let's get to the core of that onion and figure out, here's what's really going on, so that we can have an honest discussion.
So let's say you do a survey, right? So you send a survey out to all the employees, and they're
Anonymous. Great results in our annual corporate survey. Well, I'm not sure if we really know what's truly going on here.
So let's say that they are accurate, and we do have some kind of a metric understanding. Okay, here's the top 3 issues that we do. How do you work with CEOs because you have to have them to buy in, right? They may look in something and deny. No, that's. How do you work with that to kind of, I'll say, build a road to help them bridge that where they've identified those 3 key issues?
Well, the interesting thing about that conversation, Brad, is that the reason why we're brought in is generally not the reason why we stay there. And so there's a perception of reality. I have a first engagement with a prospect next week. They're a mid-market company. And this is very, very typical to what we're seeing right now, is there was some sort of technician. You're a commercial lender. You're a risk manager. Brad and Matt, we really want to promote you to management because Sally or Mike are now gone, and you get an increase in pay. And so there's some sort of a succession plan. And the sad thing that happens is that there generally is no training and development that has been done as a result of bringing you up. And there's a conceived or perceived idea that you're just going to flow into that and you're going to thrive because of the fact that you're excellent at selling commercial loans and you're great at mitigating risk. So for instance, with this meeting that's coming up next week, that was the primary reason for this first introductory meeting. The owner of the company is like, I've got these young individuals. They were technicians. Now they're mid-level managers. And we've been doing this long enough that when I have the first one-on-one with him, I'm going to be saying, okay, there's a strategy we can put into place, but it's not just about these mid-level managers. We want to start asking questions around creating a strategic plan, a cultural approach that's going to bring in the totality of, this isn't just, these 5 managers aren't just the problem. It's the whole concept of what your organization looks like, what it feels like, what you're wanting where are you wanting it to be? What do you want your clients and your customers and your employees and your friends and the people that are part of the organization to say about your business? So, not to evade your question, but oftentimes that first introductory meeting is based upon one conversation. And then as we do our work, our magic, it's about deconstructing the mythologies that have been built around the perception of what that business really, that culture really looks like, or what they think it looks like and what it actually is.
Yeah, I think when you do those first interviews, I do this with lending, you find little nuggets.
Yeah.
Right? You find out, and you're like, oh, that wasn't anything. And then you're like,
No, it's huge.
oh, there was something else. And then you start digging, you find out. You touched on kind of succession.
Yeah.
I'm curious to get your thoughts on, hey, I'm a boomer. I've own the business and I'm trying to
Silver Exodus is what it's called now. It really is. They're using that term pretty widely.
Exodus.
The Silver Exodus.
Silver Wave was the other one. Yeah. So that's a big change from, dad to son or mom to daughter or whatever it may be. Have you had a lot of experience in that world of, okay, dad's gone, now I'm in charge, and now all of a sudden the culture changed?
Yeah, and really what this is kind of tapping on is one of the things that we specialize in is social emotional intelligence. So a part of that is understanding that flexibility, resiliency has to be a component of how we move through the business world. So every person that is running a business is going to have a set of ideas that they think make sense, right? Culturally, from a business optimization standpoint, how we manufacture things, et cetera, et cetera. And then you change, I call it changing of the guards. 2.0 comes in and they've got a different vision of what they feel makes sense. There has to be a level of flexibility between both of those individuals when that baton is passing, of you're able to see out of a different window and have a different lens for what success might look for us than I did. And there has to be a willingness really on both parties, because there has to be a mutual respect for, you led the way, you got the company to where it's at now. I'm coming and I'm following behind you. I'm going to step into, owning or running the company now. What does that really look like? But there has to be a mutual, I think, respect for what the other has provided and will be offering. So we just look at it in terms of how do you become well-rounded with flexibility and thinking. Once again, I want to be respectful for how far you've taken the company, because a company that's been on the map for decades, something has been going right, obviously. Mm-hmm. And then when that baton does get passed and someone new comes in, there's a lot of fear that goes into that change in leadership, and just knowing I've got a mountain now in front of me to climb, because I've got to continue to make this company successful and keep them on the map. So how do I bring my new ideas into the room and make sure that I'm not losing sight of some of the historical lessons that we've gone through, some of the challenges that the company has gone through, and just be willing to keep an open mind.
I think to that point too, and this is an area that, again, we've been doing this a lifetime in terms of coaching and organizational health and organizational development. Owning our company, we're going on 10 or 11 years. And when we started a decade ago, there was a smattering of these conversations that were being had. And when we would do business development and sales, there was a vast response of, we understand what you do and we think it's great, but we're fine. So think back a decade ago, and it's like retention, generational dynamics were just starting to shift a little bit. Now we have, and this leads into some of our other questions that we've talked about before we started, is there's a higher level of awareness from leaders across all generations that this is a very complex discussion and something has to be done that goes beyond the P&L statement. And so succession planning, mergers and acquisitions, which that's your world, Brad. All day, every day, and you hope for them and count on them and want to be a part of them, those were areas that we could never tap into a decade and a half ago, ever, because, it's like, we're just concerned about the P&L statements and the money side. Well, the conversation of people has come into play, and the context of these conversations that you, Lisa, that you were talking about in terms of transition and succession planning, now are looking different. We were with a family business several weeks ago, and we're asking tough questions. Okay, so Mom and Dad, we want to dig into the question of, what is day one of January 2nd going to look like for you? Oh, wow. I don't know. It's like, okay, well, son and daughter-in-law, what do you expect for them? Do you want them in the office? Do you not want them in the office? What does the transition plan look like? If we don't discuss this and mom and dad are still here and they're unhappy and miserable because you're still relying on them, it's going to create undue conflict. So what we're trying to do in cultures and environments and organizations is just raise really good questions and create courage where there can be a sense of breathing in the room around, we don't have to go to a war over these questions, but we need to think about them. And there's somebody that's walking alongside of us that's a safety net to keep the lanes on the road.
You're being a mediator.
So that,
Yeah. I think that was the next question I was going to have. A couple things. I just saw a stat that came out today where it says 3 out of 10 individual producers never want to move into management. Just because those variables, because we become a manager, you take on all those additional levels of emotional intelligence. We do think there's a big lack of that across. I think everyone agrees emotional intelligence is key to success. A question I have, what happens, you guys ask great questions, which is very apparent. What happens when you face some resistance to change? I'm sure that happens quite a bit.
As human beings, for all of us, change is pretty difficult, even good change. You're getting ready to get married.
Yeah.
It's just a change to status quo of what we know today. So it brings about a level of anxiety, uncertainty, because I know what I know today, but I don't know what I don't know tomorrow. So when we start talking about change, that's always difficult. One of our first questions typically is, are you coachable?
Yeah.
And so are you willing to admit and raise your hand that, yep, I could be part of the problem. And we always say that relationships are reciprocal. There's 2 people in a relationship, both bear responsibility for the health of that relationship. It's never one-sided. It shouldn't be, because that's completely transactional. But the work that we're involved in is healthy relationships, which means I understand that there's value with everyone sitting around this table, and I have to be respectful of that. So are you coachable? Are you willing to admit that, hey, here's some areas where I probably have some opportunities for growth, and I can receive some constructive feedback without getting defensive, and do it in the name of, I know that it's positive intent that is coming, because when we are invested in a relationship with a customer, we're there first and foremost because we care. And so we're working on building trust and making sure that, we care about you. We want to help you. So the best way that we can help you is share with us what's going on, be open to change, behavioral change, and then we're able to make some adjustments to turn down some of the noise of maybe discomfort in relationships that are causing some friction in the work world, and maybe some team dynamics that are standing in the way of making some key decisions. So change is a tricky animal, but it's a part of life. So the other thing that we say too all the time is we work to help people normalize change, that, life isn't static. It's constantly moving. Don't get used to, today, because tomorrow's going to be a different day. So when we can teach people the dynamics of understanding that change is a constant component of life, it just makes it a little bit easier to deal with it.
I do want to go back, Matt, though, in terms of that conversation on social emotional intelligence, because I think it's extremely noteworthy. Any of us who have children under the age of 30 have experienced the shift of this new anomaly that has happened in their educational experience. And there's a lot of confusion out there about what social emotional intelligence is and what it's not. And oftentimes it creates social and even political discord. We keep it really, really simple. It doesn't need to go there. The reality is social emotional intelligence is simply this, and Lisa was illustrating it through what you were saying. It's number one, think of it as 4 quadrants. On the left side of the quadrant is emotional intelligence. On the right side is social intelligence. Upper left-hand quadrant is awareness of self. Who am I? What do I believe? Why do I act the way that I do? Where did this come from? Where did my behaviors pop up? Was it family of origin? Was it culture? Was it trauma? Was it learned behavior? Was it part of my education? And we believe that, and we've done this work ourselves. So it's not just we're consultants that are moving into a world where we're trying to teach other people stuff. Both of Lisa and I have children with complex needs. And talk about going through boot camp. I've got buddies that have been in special ops and Marine Corps. I'm like, I can't make it through the physical side, but I can tell you that I can make it all day long. Either one of us can make it through special ops, Navy SEAL training with emotional intelligence and going through the ringer. Because it's that deconstructing of all of the systems and the pillars that we've adopted through life to ask the tough questions of why am I the way that I am? And then that lower left-hand quadrant is that self-management piece. As a result of me knowing who I am, how do I manage myself so that I can actually function in a work environment? Where do I belong? Where do I fit? Where can I use my gifts, my talents, my abilities most wisely to be productive and to be happy, to feel a sense of fulfillment in life? And then, and as an illustration, most of my life, and Lisa knows this to be true, is I've been told that I'm too much. Okay, well, some of the things that I was told I was too much on, I needed to change or adapt. But a lot of those things, 90% of it, I just wasn't in the right environment, in the right venue. Upper right-hand corner real quick as we close that part out is social awareness. I look around the room. I know who other people are. I get to, okay, so Brad's a commercial lender, but there's more depth to him than that. Ooh, what's the makeup? Where did he come from? Who's his family of origin? Does he have family? What are the things he likes to do? And that helps me understand the behaviors. And then that lower right-hand quadrant is management of relationships. So that's really what we're doing, honestly, in a more scientific fashion when we're walking into a work environment, into an organization, and we're deconstructing all of that and asking questions. So the thing that we don't like to do is just have a leader say, well, we have this problem child employee, fix them or her. There's a reason why that person is the way that they are.
So you talked about.
Sorry about all that.
It's all the passion you have, which is great. You put a lot of thought into that. Knowing you two both personally, you do emphasize it every day. So, which is
Remote teams, right? So. So we'll talk about remote teams. That's one thing. But really what I want to kind of say is COVID fast forward.
Yeah.
So I'll give you a good example. So you can have banks, right? So banks are in multiple markets, multiple branches, or whatever. You have your immediate small team and then the big bank culture as it is. So one of the things I think when COVID hit, fast forward. One of the things I found interesting was depending on where you were in the country, you were either staying at home and you got used to working hybrid, or others were they never left. They were maybe home for a couple of weeks. So when you have an organization that's split, where do you start to try to identify culture? Because somebody's sitting in a different location and somebody's sitting in the head office. How do you kind of bring that person that's remote to create a culture when they know that they feel disconnected from the rest of the organization?
The strength that we think sit in any organization is the people asset part of it, right? And when you have this remote work where some people are here, some people are there, some people are in the office, it has presented very, very unique challenges. And we are always advocating for, if people are your assets, you have to be very dedicated about building relationships. And so we now have a challenge of how do you build a relationship out of a Brady Bunch square, which is going to be night and day different than sitting around a table here where, you can see people and there's camaraderie. It feels a lot different. So you have to be very, very intentional is what we're telling people. The intention has to be consistent And you have to be dedicated towards, how do I make sure that I am connecting with my people that are working remotely? Every work culture is going to be different. There's some that are saying, hey, we can do this remotely. And I'll say, okay, if you can, how are you working to bring your people together at some strategic times throughout the year to make sure that you're doing check-ins to say, hey, how are you really doing? I want to see you in person, and I want to be able to pat you on the shoulder and say, John, really good job there. So it's a tremendous challenge that companies are going through. I was just talking with a Gen Zer 2 weeks ago who worked all remotely. And I said, how do you build relationships with your colleagues? Do you ever get together and go out for Friday happy hour? And he's like, no, we don't do any of that. And that's how I grew up, really bonding with my, corporate friends. It would be, Thursday or Friday night. And it's like, oh, where are we going to go when we get off work? And there was a level of just connection that you built much quicker. So to circle back to your question, it has to be really intentional. And the leaders have to really put an emphasis on, this is an important part of our work culture, that we want to make sure that our people know that they are more than the title that we have hired them for. So I need to make sure that I am talking to my employees to find out, tell me about your families. Tell me what challenges you're going through. What do you do for fun? In your free time. How do we build those connections in a way that is truly meaningful, that lets you know that I really do give a damn about you?
And I do think to go back to where we started with this entire conversation on culture, that's why this work is so important, to be able to ask business owners and leaders, what is your culture, and go through that path of discovery. Because oftentimes it's flipped around, that we're trying to fill seats to fill a role, and then we end up with something that doesn't fit, and we don't know why it doesn't fit, because we haven't identified with some level of clarity. And we advocate for the fact that we don't need a 3-ring binder. It's just a couple of simple paragraphs and statements around, this is who we are, so that it's supporting hiring practices, and we're asking those questions in tandem with skills and abilities and education and experience. But we believe that the tides are flipping, that business leaders are now needing to hire based upon culture, social emotional intelligence, the value of who somebody is, rather than just their work experience and their talents.
Just the overall shift moving towards that way. You look at college education now, you have to have this certain test score to qualify for a school. I know even
that's changing in and of itself.
Exactly. Yeah. What intangibles do you bring to the table beyond just the technical skills? And you look at some major corporations, don't even need a college degree anymore. You bring those other variables to the table. I think the intangibles are critical, equally important are the technical skills, but I think the valuation of the intangibles is weighing much larger now.
Yeah.
I guess I have your favorite question. We are on the Cash Flow Chronicles. So how do you financially quantify culture? That's a tough one, right?
So if you don't have healthy culture, your work environment will pay the price. You're going to lose key people who are going to say, I'm going to pick up my bags and I'm going to go elsewhere.
Or not attract the right people that fit within the organization because of the blinders that you have. Sorry.
No, but we see that happen all the time, because I think there's a level of astuteness that is happening over, especially the past 10 years, as people are becoming more socially and emotionally intelligent about, I'm not going to be treated with disrespect. There's a certain level of expectation of what a healthy relationship truly looks like in the workplace that I am going to not only expect, but demand. And we're seeing a pushback where there's a level of vocalization.
Across all generations, by the way.
Yeah.
It's not just, quote unquote, these kids.
Yeah, the shift that has taken place, which has been really cool to track, is, in the 80s and even in the 90s, there was a level of the leadership teams were more authoritative, do as I say, fall in line, be good soldiers, where now there's an understanding that what people are responding to more is empathetic leadership, leadership that is embracing, once again, I care about who you are as my employee. How do I make sure that I am supporting you and letting you know that I care about you and respect you? Because if that isn't taken into consideration, you're going to have, it's the turnover, it's the decrease in productivity, it's the rumor mill starts churning up and people aren't invested in what they're doing.
It's having to go back to the recruiter and pay the 10 to 20% fee that comes with headhunting another person to be able to fulfill another role because they weren't happy, they weren't content. There was something going on inside of that organization.
All right, so it's the Cash Flow Chronicles. Give me an ROI.
We talked about that.
Two points. I think we all have had a leader that has made an impact on our life because of that emotional intelligence, the fact they care about you, while they still had to deliver on the financial metrics.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can all think of leaders like that. And I still talk to one of my first bosses when I lived in North Dakota, and we share a birthday, which is funny, but just because he had that impact on me. What do you want the listeners to know, and how can we help you?
Oh, great. Well, I to keep this confined in a short period of time, and
We could talk forever about it.
Well, it depends on the seat that you're sitting in. Number one is if you're in a place of leadership, you own your own business, you're an entrepreneur, start asking the question, what are the questions you're not asking, and what is your blind spot? What are the things that have been your go-to around, well, this is what business means, and how do I need to educate myself, and who do I need to bring in to be able to do that? If we move down into the organization itself, we really we're starting to focus, and we're seeing another epidemic in and of itself around mid-level and key managers. And we talked about that. Using the illustration of the two of you, and we want to advance you into a place of management, of having organizational leaders and managers be honest and truthful about what they're lacking and the places that they need to grow. We have solutions for that. We're working on that. We're creating peer-to-peer mentoring groups where we're bringing people from different industries together, where it's a group process of learning and growth and pushing and challenging each other and holding each other accountable and networking. So I would say that in the totality of the conversation of Cash Flow Chronicles and organizational health is finding people that you can surround yourself within your organization or outside of the organization to be able to ask tough questions about outside of the P&L statement. What are those intangibles that need to be addressed to help optimize growth, efficiency, and work productivity?
You'd hate to be the person waking up every day and hating your job. When you have a great culture, it makes a difference for sure.
Always.
Anything else to add, Lisa? I want to make sure you both can contribute.
I think John did a really nice job of kind of tying that up. I think probably the only other thing that I would add is that, for any organization, it's just really important to be willing to be brutally honest. There's elephants that exist in every single corporation, and a lot of times it's fear that holds us back from admitting, okay, here's the truth, and it doesn't have to be something that you're ashamed of, because as human beings, we're messy. We're complex, we're messy, we have so many facets to how we perceive things and how we move through life. So if people can move past that fear, sitting in the discomfort, we always say, is a great place to be, because that's where the growth truly happens for organizations. Sitting around a table, rolling up your sleeves, saying, we have to have a hard conversation, and it's going to be really uncomfortable, and it's probably going to make me feel anxious or nervous, but we have to have it. And so we can help teach how to do those conversations. But when they can learn how to do that, that's when the cool stuff really starts happening.
That's great. And then Brad, anything else to add?
You know, I was in a presentation the other day that kind of talked about people, right? Where you're actually in the people business.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
business is people. Employees are people. Your vendors are people. Your customers are people.
Yeah,
Doesn't matter what you're selling.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
business.
yeah. That's good, Brad. Yeah.
When did you see that shift, Brad? I mean, from commercial lending, and because I think that has been not, we're taking this past the achievable time, but it's just, I'm just curious. I mean, even in banking, that was like one of the last pillars that Lisa and I said, we want to get into financial services, service, all of those industries. And it was hard because there's a different, it's left brain thinking, right? So when did you see that shift in terms of the conversation around the people business?
Focusing on people.
Yeah.
You got to move organizations that want to have that mindset, right? I think banking in general has been, it's the way we've always done it. And if you're in an organization that doesn't allow you to change and voice your opinion, it's stagnant, right? And it goes back to, you have managers that have been in the role a long time. What's the career path? Right? So how do I get into a manager role if I don't have a training program, right? So
Bingo.
mentor program?
Yeah.
Well, kind of, but I'm not, it's close, but not close enough. So I think that's one of the easiest things. You have to have a training program, build your backlog of people to kind of help guide them along. But in banking, it's what we've always done.
I think I'm seeing a big shift because it's such a performance-based environment.
Sure.
And just the turn and burn culture, which is very unfortunate. So can definitely speak to that.
Thanks, guys, by the way, for inviting us on. This is fun. We love what you're doing.
I appreciate that. The goal is really promoting other good people and giving them a platform to share what they provide. I know culture is never the cash topic, but it's so vital to organizations. And you can tell ROI, while not justifiable from here's the investment, here's what you're going to return, just a healthy workplace environment because of the people, like Brad said.
Yeah.
So
Appreciate it, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. We appreciate the time.